Okay, so we just got back from our trip out west. This is 2015. Our main destination was the Wind Rivers, and this is going to be just a day-by-day account of everything that happened on the trip. So, first day one, we drove and got off 8 a.m. or so and drove down, passed through Chicago, which was terrible. Eventually made it to South Dakota, and we saw these spectacular clouds for a while in South Dakota, and after that, there was some amazing cloud-to-cloud lightning that lasted for quite a while. Then we checked the radar, saw this huge storm coming to us, and it said thunderstorm warning and threatened 70-mile-an-hour winds with golf ball-size hail. And we had marble-size hail hit the car, no damage, but the winds were really intense, and the rain was intense too. So this is at night. We had to pull over on I-90 out in the middle of nowhere and just stop and wait the storm out for a bit. And we did that, then got into the Badlands. Campground was full, and we thought about sleeping in our car just in the visitor center. Ended up driving another 45 minutes or so to Sage Creek Campground and got there in the middle of the night, but we had a place. Next day, we got up and saw the Badlands, drove through it, and were really impressed. It was a beautiful place. And at night, we're going to go backpacking into the Badlands, just like a half mile or so, and we did that, and it was also very nice. It was a quiet place. We saw another storm come in, had a double rainbow over the canyon, which was really cool. Slept there, got out the next day, and we're pretty much done with the Badlands, so we drove, and we ended up driving to Yellowstone, just east of the park, and found a little campground, National Forest campground by a river, which was quite nice. Stayed there, and the next day we pulled into Yellowstone, and there's like traffic jam once again getting into Yellowstone. Drove around, and the visitor center gave us some recommendations about where a campsite might be available, and we tried to hit for Indian Creek, I think Indian River, something like that on the northwest side of the park. Got there about 12 o'clock noon, and there were 5 campsites left, and at that point there were 3 of us waiting in line, and there were a few other people that the campground host had given the tickets to, and we were waiting for them to come back before they could assign us a campsite. And we were waiting there for an hour, just sitting there in line, and there was a retired couple in charge of it. There was a wife that was behind the counter, and then her husband was driving around the park looking for people, and they were kind of going at it back and forth, and it was pretty hilarious. It was entertaining for an hour, but we got a campsite, which was good. And later that day, we drove around Yellowstone, went to Mammoth Hot Springs, which was nice, and then we ended up driving around to the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, the big waterfalls area. Got there late afternoon, early evening, which was very beautiful, and took some pictures and drove back to our campsite. Next day, we got up and we went to, we're heading south to the Tetons, but we drove to the Old Faithful area, saw some things along the way, and saw Old Faithful, which was cool. We had to wait around for a couple hours in that area to get the timing right, but as we got back, as we finished seeing Old Faithful, got back to the car, and huge parking lots everywhere over there. There was a pickup truck next to us that had some snacks wrapped in a couple plastic bags in the back of the pickup truck, and it was a bad idea. And the ravens got a hold of that, and they were having a feast, and everybody walking back to their car was just stopping and taking pictures and looking at these ravens eating all these chips and Fritos and whatnot, and it was pretty funny, but it was a stupid thing to do for them. And we never got to see their reaction when they got back. We were left before then. So we got out of there and drove south to the Tetons. We were able to find a campsite at Coulter Bay at night, and slept there. The next morning, went to the visitor center in the Tetons, which is very crowded and crazy, and ironically just got out of the visitor center, and there was a parking lot and just a short walk to a beach right in front of the big lake by the Tetons, and there was nobody there. There was like maybe 2 other people there, but really quiet, so we just hung out there and enjoyed the peacefulness of that for a little bit. We drove around Tetons. We hiked the Potholes area, and we were going to drive up Signal Mountain, but that road was closed for some construction or something. So we just drove to the Jenny Lake area and checked that out for a bit, saw the views, and drove along south, and eventually got out of the Tetons and drove to the Wind Rivers. And got into the Winds. There's a campground along this road that drives way back into the Winds. The campground's name is Trails End, and there's only like 7 or 8 sites in the campground, and it's like $7 a night to stay there. So we weren't sure if they were going to have a spot after all the driving we did to get there. And we pull up in the campground, and there was, I think, one other person camped there. It might have been a campground host, but the whole place was empty. And after we got there, a couple more people showed up, and we talked to some of them, but mosquitoes were bad there. So that was our first taste of mosquitoes, and we spent the night just packing our gear for our backpacking trip. We're going to go out for 4 or 5 days in the Winds. And then the following morning we got up and started hiking, and we looked at the map and we said, okay, we're going to go to Seneca Lake, and it looks like about a 4-mile hike, so it shouldn't be bad at all. And we hiked and we hiked and we hiked. We passed Photographer's Point, which we knew was there, which was nice. And the hiking was in forest and kind of up and down and up and down, and it took forever. And we got there probably, 4 in the afternoon, and just exhausted. Mosquitoes were horrible, and it was like hiking through a forest all day. And why did it take so long? It was crazy. The second day we had the same kind of experience. Like, the hiking was just taking way longer than we thought. And then we looked at the map on the second day, and we looked at it again and saw that we were reading it wrong, and what we thought was going to be a 4-mile hike was more like an 8 or 9-mile hike. So that made it make more sense, and it also increased our motivation, and I guess just encouraged us that yes, we still can hike. It's not like we're getting old and we can't do anything anymore. So we night 1 in the Wind River Range, we put the tent by Seneca Lake. It was a beautiful spot. There was nobody else there. Just we saw a couple people early on in the hike, but we didn't see anybody by the lake at all. So that was nice. And we were going to just make a base camp there for a couple days and do day hikes from that point, which we did. And the second day of this hike, we got up, we left the tent there, and we were going to hike to Titcomb Basin. We did. So we hiked around Upper Seneca Lake, which was good. There was a trail. The trail went along the side of the lake, and it was actually flooded. The water levels were up, not because of snowmelt, but because May and June had been really rainy months in the Wyoming area, so water levels were up because of that. So we either had to hike through the side of the lake to get to the other side of the trail, or we had to bushwhack this trail that went way up, and we ended up doing that to not get wet. And hiked around the lake, then we went up a little pass, and from there we got a view of the mountains of the Titcomb Basin, which were spectacular. And we headed toward Island Lake, which was a big feature there, and just the whole view, the whole way after that pass, past Island Lake and up to the Titcomb Basin was spectacular in every direction. And we would hike for a few feet, and then we'd just stop and take pictures all around us because it was so beautiful. The wind was nice. There was a constant breeze on us, and we were moving pretty good too, so we really didn't have any issues with mosquitoes that day. So it was the best day of the trip between the views that we had and the lack of bugs. It was really great. We got to the Titcomb Basin, and it was spectacular, hung out there for a little bit, and then we turned around and hiked back. And before getting to the camp, we had to filter water, and we did that at this little inlet to Seneca Lake. And it was terrible because the bugs were there, and I had these. I think we went back to the tent and changed into Tevas because I was wearing Tevas and socks, and I just had these mosquitoes that I'd kill all the time on my socks, and there'd be blood stains on my socks all the time, and it was horrible. So cooking there was terrible too because the mosquitoes were so bad. We would cook food. We'd be having bug spray head to toe, and we'd have mosquito nets and rain jackets just to keep the mosquitoes off. But we couldn't stand and eat or sit down and eat because they were swarming us so bad, so we had to keep moving. So we'd have our little dish in our hand, and we'd walk back and forth just to try to keep the bugs off of us. It was really terrible. So we slept again at Seneca Lake, and the next morning we woke up. It was the third day of this backpacking trip. We were going to hike along the Highline Trail, so we did. We went back around Upper Seneca Lake and went up the Highline Trail a bit, and it was nice. Not nearly as spectacular as the Titcomb Basin hike. So after a couple miles, we decided to turn around and go back, and got back to camp, and we got all of our stuff and decided to start hiking out. So we packed up the tent, and we hiked out about 4 miles, about halfway to the car. We hiked in the forest, and the mosquitoes were once again just horrible. And we pitched the tent. It was around 7 o'clock or so at night. We found a little flat spot between a couple little shallow ponds, and again, the filtering water experience was terrible. The eating was terrible because the mosquitoes were so bad. So our goal is just to get all that stuff done as quickly as we can so we can get in a tent, and we did that. And next morning we got up and just said we're not even going to eat breakfast. We're just going to pack and run and try to get back to the car as quickly as we can. And sprayed up with mosquito spray, and after probably an hour of hiking, the bugs were so bad, I was going crazy, and we had to put our mosquito nets on and just hike as quickly as we can to get out of there. And we got out of there, and then we decided to go to Craters of the Moon in Idaho. So we drove to Craters of the Moon, Idaho, got there early evening, set up in the campground where it was just peaceful and quiet and no bugs, and we had one of the most enjoyable evenings just sitting around the camp outside reading books and taking pictures, and relaxed and enjoyed ourselves. That was great. The next morning we got up and did all the touristy stuff at Craters of the Moon, saw all the stuff. It was hot. It was like 95 degrees, and all the black basalt around there on the ground heats up to about 150 degrees during the day, so it's just heat everywhere and you can't get out of it. There's no shade. And we're going to go backpacking that night. So after seeing all the stuff we wanted to see, we ended up just hanging out at a picnic table by the visitor center. They had actually a lawn there that they had, like they water and they mow. So we stayed there, and there were a couple trees, and we just stayed there for hours, just killing time. And we stayed there a little too long, so by the time it was evening, we had to go backpack, and we got to our trail at 8 p.m. and we were going to go out to Echo Crater, which is about a 3-mile hike, and it was a little late to start that. So we got on the trail and we hiked as fast as we could and tried to take minimal pictures, but we hiked, and it was getting darker and darker, and we weren't really sure which one Echo Crater was or how to get to it, or if there'd be a trail or what. So finally, after hiking about an hour and a half, we figured out that let's just find a flat place to pitch the tent and pitch it and set up camp, which we did. And it was a beautiful sunset going on while we were hiking, and it was a beautiful campsite too. It was really quiet. No running water, not really any bugs, no people. The only thing you could hear was wind, so it was really nice. Got up from that the next day and hiked out, and then we drove. We were going to drive from Idaho to Utah, and we stopped by the EBR-1, Experimental Breeder Reactor 1 in Idaho, which is the world's first, or America's first, nuclear power plant. Had a little tour of that. Then we kept going, and we got down to Dinosaur National Monument in Utah. Got there early evening, camped in the Green River Campground on the Utah side, and the next morning got up and saw the Dinosaur quarry, which was really amazing. And after that, we drove into the Colorado side, and that's basically just a scenic drive, which was also really nice and really remote. Got to the end of that drive, and we did a little hike, just a couple mile hike, and we kind of got rained on that, so we had to run away after that hike. Got back in the car and then drove through northern Colorado, up by Craig. The area in northwest Colorado was just very remote and desolate. And after we got to Craig and Steamboat Springs, it was a pretty drive, especially the area by Walden and getting north of Rocky Mountain National Park. It was really nice. And we drove through a canyon and had a great campsite by this rushing, roaring river, just a little bit west of Fort Collins. Camped there, and then the next day was just heading out, driving through Nebraska, Iowa. We ended up deciding to get a hotel near Iowa City. We did that, and we continued on the next day and got majorly stuck in traffic in Chicago, but ended up getting home around 7 p.m. A great trip.